experience of my life. Anybody that knows me knows I studied undergrad Africana Studies, and my favorite tribal group is the Dogon, and I got to see the Dogon live, not just in video, and see their beautiful dances. I'll cry later tonight because I can't, I'm a G right now, but amazing. I'm so excited to be here and experience this in person. Today, I'm at the Dogon Festival here in Mali, and I'm not even going to pretend to be calm about it. I'm excited, deeply excited. If you're new here, I'm Bianca O. I'm a Black American living abroad, and I'm also an international educator. I studied Africana Studies and secondary education social sciences. So the way I travel is not just where can I eat and where can I take pictures. It's also what does this place mean and what histories are living inside this moment. And the Dogon have been my favorite ethnic group to study for years. The Dogon are an indigenous people of Mali, most associated with the cliff of Bandiagara, a massive cultural landscape of villages, ritual spaces, and architecture that UNESCO recognizes as globally significant. Their relationships with the land, the built environment, and the spiritual life is so deep that the landscape itself tells a story, not just the people. Now, I'll be honest, one of the first things that drew me to studying the Dogon years ago wasn't the architecture or even the mass. It was the Sirius B story. There's a widely circulated claim that Dogon cosmology included knowledge of the Sirius star system, specifically Sirius B, before Western astronomers officially documented it or even knew about it. The Sirius B claims come primarily from early 20th century French anthropologists, and many contemporary scholars debate how that information was recorded, interpreted, or possibly influenced by outside contact. In other words, it's complicated, and I don't need all of that to respect the intelligence of the Dogon people. Their cosmology, architecture, initiation systems, symbolism, and ecological knowledge are powerful on their own. And that's what I'm here to honor. When people hear Mali, a lot of them limit its significance to their knowledge of the great Mansa Musa or modern political unrest. But Mali holds the legacy of one of the most influential empires in African history, the Mali Empire. Founded in the 13th century under Sundiata Keita, Mali became one of the most powerful empires in West Africa. It controlled gold and salt trade routes. Timbuktu became the center of scholarship. Political systems were structured and sophisticated. And like every empire in the world, it expanded and eventually declined. But here's the part that matters for this story. When empires weaken, people move, families move, warriors move, traders move, entire communities relocate and rebuild. In oral traditions connected to the Mani expansion, a queen named Masariko is remembered as a Mandinka leader who was exiled and led her people away from the imperial sphere towards what is now Sierra Leone. This story lives primarily in oral tradition, not in neatly archived imperial documents. Much of West African history is carried differently through oral history, memory, and community records. But oral history is still history. The point is understanding that the memory of leadership, exile, and movement is part of the region's story, and it aligns with what we know about large-scale southward shifts after Mali's decline. Scholars have written about political and economic upheaval in Mali contributing to southward expansion and increased reliance on southern trade routes. And in the 1500s, there are accounts of Mandi-speaking groups, often discussed as the Mani, moving into the Sierra Leone region and reshaping local societies. This matters because it's one of the bridges between the Mali imperial world and what becomes Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, the Mende and Timni people emerged as major societies. These were not simplistic tribes. These were complex political and cultural systems with agricultural expertise. Spiritual institutions like the Poro and Sunday societies, artistic traditions, and deep rice cultivation knowledge. And that rice knowledge mattered because when transatlantic slave trade intensified, enslavers intentionally targeted people from rice-growing regions. Many Mende and Timni people were captured and transported to the rice plantations of South Carolina and Georgia. And something extraordinary happened. Despite enslavement, despite brutality, culture survived. Mainly due to geographic isolation and being in a slave society versus a society with slaves. The Gullah Geechee people of the Sea Islands preserve linguistic patterns, rice cultivation techniques, and craftsmanship traditions that trace back to the Upper Guinea coast. Linguist Lorenzo Dow Turner documented clear West African influences in Gullah speech. When Turner published Africanism in the Gullah dialect in 1949, he challenged the idea that Gullah was simply corrupted English. He showed that it carried living West African language patterns, including words from Mende. So if you ever made reference to a peanut as a goober or a bag as a tote, you too have been influenced by linguistic history from the west coast of Africa tied to the Gullah Geechee peoples of Southern America. For me, as a Black American, that's powerful, because it reframes our story from loss to continuity. We were not blank slates in America. We carried knowledge. So what got transported isn't just bodies. It's agricultural knowledge, language patterns, craftsmanship, and spiritual memory. I gotta do this part without crying, y'all, so bear with me. But in 2021, I had the opportunity to work in Sierra Leone with a nonprofit focused on athletics and educational enrichment for local children. At the time, it felt like purpose, but it felt like work. I didn't know it might be something deeper. About 2 years later, my mom did her DNA through African ancestry, and we found out our maternal lineage traced back to the Mende and Timni peoples of Sierra Leone. That shifted something in me, because it meant that when my daughters and I lived in Sierra Leone, we may have been among the first in our direct maternal line to return in 400 to 500 years. since the transatlantic slave trade. And now, I live in Mali. So imagine the timeline. A Mali imperial world that declines and triggers movement south. Oral traditions naming leaders like Queen Masariko in that migration memory. Mende and Temne societies forming and flourishing. The Atlantic slave trade ripping people away. Gullah Geechee communities preserving culture through language and survival. And me, just a girl from Florida, standing at the Dogon Festival in Mali, watching living culture and realizing history isn't linear. It moves, it bends, it returns. And on a lighter note, I guess I owe my dad a thank you. Growing up, he used to call me his little Geechee gal because I love eating rice so much. Turns out, that might have been deeper than either of us realized. If you enjoyed this video, if this made you think a little differently, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. There is a lot more to uncover. I'll see you in the next one. Bisous. I think that's how you say it.